Hello again guys. In this video we will take a closer look at user interface designs on the Hornet and see what they've changed since the Pax-East reveal. I've been given permission to use assets and information from the April 2014 Jump Point issue, of which talks about HUD designs and concepts in detail. If you haven't seen my previous videos on dogfights of Now and Beyond, check it out by clicking the links here or the description. It will go into detail of all sorts of systems used, but also covers the HUD in detail. Lots has changed already since then, but we'll have to use images this time until we can get some new gameplay footage or the module itself to play with. Through systems, knowledge is power. So are better weapons, but they work hand in hand. Exactly how, what, and when that information is fed to you is key, and the function of all these displays are to increase situational awareness of the pilot without causing sensory overload. You don't want to distract the pilot with needless pop-ups or items that interrupt the focus of the pilot, figuratively and literally. Much of the layout in a cockpit today has undergone standardization, both airlines and fighters alike. A unified design makes life easier for everybody. Anywhere from the drawing board, to creating modular designs and repairs, to pilots automatically recognizing information given to them, whether in a Boeing 737 or F-35. These designs are constantly evolving. As technologies improve, the need to have knobs and dials that control functions that were once manual can now be operated by the aircraft automatically. So, to start, we'll look at the overall UI of the Hornet. This is a better quality version that's similar to the one in the Pax-East video, and that's what I've been talking about so far. But things have changed quite a bit in the next image here. It's hard to tell if it's an in-game image or not, but what stands out immediately is the increased field of view. If this is because the user is zoomed in or out, we don't know. It just looks much better. Like before, we'll systematically work through the items and go into the details if we have available data. First, the items on the left and right of the screen, alongside the highlighted target, all seem to be projected on the helmet visor, like our head-mounted display. Hopefully, if we look around in free view with products like TrackIR and Oculus Rift, we'll get a similar HUD like that fixed on the center. Top left, we have a wireframe-like top-down view of your craft, like the target list on the right, which we'll get onto shortly, but it now has more detail to better discern specific areas of damage. On closer inspection, there are boxes over critical areas such as weapon hardpoints with main and auxiliary thrusters as well. Above this, we have a list of abbreviations which are close to a caution panel, but I'll try to discern what they mean. OVR, I believe this will light up if we pull too hard a turn that will bring any axis into hazardous amounts. As we can see, it's already lit up, most likely due to the 7.5G warning in red, but we'll see that later. Weapons, but for what reason? Are they firing? Are they damaged? Will it show when all the weapons are damaged or only a few? It's hard to say. AVI could be avionics. I assume that when thruster controls get damaged it will light up. PWR, power plant maybe, related to its status. Shields, being down if illuminated. And comm, again, if it's damaged I guess comms will be highlighted if they're down. Naturally, we don't know all the UI functions yet. They're not final and it's all guesswork, but as I said, it looks like a caution indicator panel. But we already have other locations that show similar or identical abbreviations. So, moving on, just above our left display we see the same ones with the inclusion of life for life support and VRS, which I'm trying to figure out. I guess it could be something to a flight control system, FLCS, which keeps the aircraft automatically trimmed and heading where you want it to go and helps when control surfaces are damaged. So I'm assuming it could be called Vectored Reaction System to assist our craft in flying like a plane would, but in space. Opposite this, above the right screen, we have another caution panel. Ammo, fuel, heat, weapons, radar and sensors, which are all self-explanatory, so we won't go into that. And more caution panels at the top of the screen. First, the fixed points connected to the frame of the cockpit, oxygen level, internal pressure, hull integrity, and fuel level. Again, these seem to be mostly self-explanatory. Having them just off your peripheral vision is a good location, but just in view that when it does start to blare in a bright contrasting colour, you'll notice it. Then we have the HMD cautions at the top of the visor, which perches nicely in with the fixed caution lights. These include radar, which I assume highlighted means that it's on, so that tells me that it can be turned off. Yay! IFCS, which is the Intelligent Flight Control System, which during fault conditions will do its best to keep you flying where you want it to go. MISL could be missile, but if that's a launch warning or if you're out, it's hard to tell. Heat, collision, fuel, which is highlighted right now, and G-force. Again, some of these do sound self-explanatory, but without actually knowing what they mean, we'll move on. We also have two bars at the top left and right. Top left we have what seems to be a heat gauge, maybe cabin heat in case we turn off our systems or it's damaged. And then in the right we have the power bar, which I assume will simply show how much overall power we have. So, you know, the biggest strain would probably be firing energy-based weapons, and then that bar would go down. Right at the very, very top it looks like different flight modes. Combat, star map, which I guess will bring up a map and other navigation aids. Mining, which is interesting to see on the Hornet. And ground for either planetside or landing on a surface. And off, whatever that means. Guess it's like that big red button with no label. Do you press it? Do you not? At the very bottom of our visor, we have a few icons and numbers, so let's take a stab at guessing what they could be. The first two on the left look familiar to my previous video. The leftmost looks like ballistic ammo count at 1500, with the next one showing 7 missiles. Then we have a 0% in orange. This could be lock segment percentages, but we'll talk about that later. Then we have an icon that looks like chaff maybe, but the amount is quite high. And moving right to the last two icons, I believe the first one's listing amount of all known objects on the radar, and I can't quite figure out the second one. Although we haven't mentioned flares yet. Right now I see an issue regarding the caution panels. You don't want to spread them around your vision. Personally I think at most that a caution panel should be in one location with a master caution light. What this means is that if any of the caution lights turn on, so will the master caution. The master caution announces that you need to look and figure out what it is, with the ability to then press it to acknowledge and stop it warning you. In doing this, you will save a lot of space and clutter, but the ones at the top of the cockpit are pretty cool where they are. If there's one thing I'd like to add, it's a missile ready to fire light. Just like in the F-15, when a missile is ready to fire, it'll similarly illuminate two lights, which are called shoot lights. But we'll talk about missiles later. Okay, so back to the left side. We have the same load factor we've seen already, but I'm not sure about its position. I mean, it's a great tool because you see the load on each axis, but I'd like to see just the option to show a simple number like 1 or 7.5 G, and it will automatically show the highest load. For the most part, we as a pilot will know where the load will be. We're in control of the aircraft, so all I need to know how high it is. Positive, negative, or lateral. Just tell me the highest amount. I'm in control. Next, we have the weapon list, which has done away with 3D icons, which saves a heck of a lot of space. We can see it's listed by numbers, and those note the preset group of weapons. So, for example, if I wanted my ball turret just to fire, I could assign that to group 1. And if I want to use just lasers and not my miniguns, as they use energy and won't waste ammo, group 2. And finally, if I want to fire everything, I can assign them to group 3. It's very simple and customizable. I could be mistaken here though, they only show one weapon in each group, but for the sake of utility, I think them having groups with whatever hard points you want firing in that mode is better than listing all weapons. In the center of the screen, we have the head-up display with more tapes. Woohoo! They're placeholder of course, so both sides show the same value. Traditionally, the left would be speed, and as we can see next to the speed tape has a small gauge which could be relative velocity to the target or thrust setting. Since it says 50 and the thrust amount below also says 50, I assume it's thrust. And again, traditionally on the right would be altitude, but we don't need altitude here, really speaking. So what else could we use that tape for? Well, in my dogfight brief we talked about situational awareness and knowing where you're flying, so this could show us our relative pitch. In the center we have our gun bore sight to help us aim without tracking. Nothing to critique on that point, except maybe it would be cool to be able to resize that. Moving down, we have the radar or 3D holosphere, which seems to have a lot more information and clarity added to it since the Pax-East video. If we take a closer look, according to the magazine, this could be a mode where we take a closer look at our radar like a snap view. What shows up on your head-mounted display is it seems to have blurred out the background. The hope for the radar in this mock-up is to make sure it's not too busy and have the ability to zoom in or out from my point of view, show friends, foes, and automatically add a number next to the target. In this specific example, our ship is the green triangle in the middle. and we have target 1 selected, emphasized by an enlarged and solid diamond. The rings on the radar probably go solid to help aid which target you're locked onto, while everything else has a dashed line. Unscanned or unknown objects are blue dots, but for identified objects or craft, enemies show up in orange diamonds, and presumably friendlies are in blue. They mentioned that the diameter of each ring is affected by the target's range from you, and depending on their direction, highlight a part of that circle to show you if they're in front or behind easier. Speaking on the topic of range, we're unable to actually tell the range of any of these targets on the radar, and having rings that change scale might get messy in large battles. This is why I think they should fix the rings showing a set range. On the bottom right of the radar, it shows zoom times 2, or 100 meters. Extrapolating skills from the fire control radar on the F-16, I'll assume ship 2 is around 100 meters away on the edge of my current scan level, and target 1 being just over halfway between the previous target and ourselves, so about 75 meters. Okay, at these ranges it doesn't matter, they're all for the most part going to be visual, but guiding you in the right direction is great. We don't know how far our radar will work, and with technology such as the data link between ships, there has to be radar contacts out to tens and tens of kilometers, so being able to clearly show those distances and highlight objects is very important. I'd like to see the outer ring be a range the radar is set to, with a 75% and 50% ring, keeping the inside clear and up to our intelligence to work out the distances. The last graphical aid are lines coming from the circle toward the diamond, telling us if they're above or below us relatively. You won't too much about how they've explained their target list and animations, since that really needs gameplay footage. So far, there's only one issue I have with the design philosophy: flashy animations. Yep, they do look really cool, but that's the short of it. Having detailed models or animations for the sake of looks instead of utility interferes with a couple of things. First up is what we've seen from the missile lock in the Pax-East video. It has parts that fly out to the target circle, but I think this could be better done by either lights that show up like the F-15, or have some other markers around the target, like an icon or a small launch zone. We won't talk about audio though, that's for another video. Having things pop up on the HUD that interferes with your vision should be avoided, in my opinion anyway. It goes on to mention that Chris Roberts wanted to see ships on the radar have a 3D model, but at the sizes we're dealing with, I'm not sure that's a good idea. If you're zoomed on the radar, maybe, I can see that, but when you're not focused on it, you'll barely get to see what it is alone, because it's just too far away. As well as wanting them to have them rotate based on the orientation, but that further leaves problems when they're at odd angles and you can't quickly identify a target. That's why I think 2D designs work better for this. It's like a silhouette or outline, which all leads to quicker identification. Moving on to targeting reticules before locking up a target. First things you'll have are uncertain objects, objects that your radar can't properly identify at this point in time. It might be very far out, at the max range of your sensors, or a ghost object. We just don't know yet. We can see the icon is a faded hexagon, which we're told will scale depending on how close you get to it. Next comes certain objects. It's mentioned that this will be the most familiar icon we'll be seeing, and the dash in the circle shows the direction of travel of said object. When you decide to select the object, this is called the selection reticule, which have circular dash segments that have a meaning which we'll go into shortly. Included from this mode is the distance from object. The next phase will be acquiring a target and scanning. I assume that if you do decide to scan or lock a target, said target will be aware of such an action and will be warned of your presence. There may be passive and active sensors at play though as well. Joint Point states that when you start scanning a target, 10 segments will fly off screen into your target reticule, each one representing 10%. You can initiate a scan using head look or through the radar. If done by looking at it, the segments will fly from the edge of the helmet, and if through the radar, will pop out from there toward the target. While this looks cool, it seems like it could get distracting and tiresome to watch every time, but without actually witnessing it and playing it myself, I can't form a final opinion. But I'd prefer a more simple design, maybe even to get rid of the flying element and just include a filling circle with segments. Now we've scanned a target, let's talk about what it looks like when we've locked it. In the first image, the target has been identified as an enemy, so has turned orange into what they call the enemy or critical color space. Once the scanning circle has completed, it will change into the locked target reticule. They state that this shows a locked target that is also the primary selection. This tells me that you can lock onto multiple targets at once and select which one to focus on. The target has been given an identification number of 3, which, when we talked about data links earlier and command and control in my previous video, is that if I'm playing with a wingman, that his number 3 will be the same as my number 3, or things are going to get confusing. We've been shown that we can deselect a target, but still have it locked on, shown here. The inner circle acts as a radial progress meter that fills up depending on the range to your radar, up to max range. If it fills up, that means it's very far away and on the edge of your radar's range. Likewise, when you get close to what I assume will be short-range combat, it will disappear, giving you better clarity on your target. They also use this as a guide to see how quickly or slowly the target is changing in distance relation to you. This will be an awesome tool for visualizing a relative velocity to your target, without the need to look away. The next piece of information come in the form of 9 dots around the edge of the target circle. This helps in visualizing the target's direction of flight. The dots can sit inside or outside of the ring, depending if the target is moving toward or away from you. If the target is moving toward you, they sit on the inside of the circle, and if it's moving away from you, they sit on the outside. If the target decides to bank right while still flying away from you, the dots start to gravitate to the outer right, and the more they cluster up, the harder they are turning. So, now it's pretty easy to imagine how the dots would move when the target is moving in any direction. Switching back to actually selecting a target, in Falcon BMS they call the selected target gun mode the Enhanced Envelope Gun Sight, or EEGS. Don't really need to go into that. But in Star Citizen they call it the ITTS, short for Information, Targets and Threat Simulators. This mode's primary function is for engaging an object with guns and missiles. In order to prevent these markers from overlapping other elements, part of the outer segment will be removed in the direction of travel of the target, further increasing situational awareness so you know the target's travel direction, as seen here. Now we see 2 markers pop up, a triangle and a square. The triangle represents lasers at target range, while the square shows ballistics at target range. Simply, if you want a shot to hit, either of those need to be over the target, and the reason for the 2 markers is that light travels faster than we can fire bullets. But even at the ranges represented here, we shouldn't need to lead so far ahead, so these weapons could be plasma-based or other weapons like neutron cannons, which don't get anywhere close near to the speed of light. So we can understand why it won't be instantaneous. But we shouldn't rule out weapons that will be able to in the future of the game. Both these markers are slightly dimmed, showing that none of your weapons will hit the target if you fire. But I'm not a fan of dimming identifiers, since things can get messy when there's a lot of information on the screen. But not to worry, because when your weapons do get in range, they fill with a blue marker. This gives you both time to realize when you're about to be in range, and when you are. Again, I'm not a fan of icons that fill up or block views of your target. It would be better to simply change the triangle from orange to blue when it's ready to fire. In the same image, we can see that the ballistic weapons are not pointed ahead of the target enough to hit, but the lasers are. They mentioned that they're worried if we have a load of weapons with different projectile speeds and such that it could get messy, which is understandable. Maybe showing the direction of travel on the target can have a horizontal line like this, showing the weapons that are fastest shooting to the slowest. We as a pilot should know what weapons we have equipped, and will learn the different lead points of each weapon. But I'm sure they can do better. After all, they have the skills to pay the bills, not me. In the next image we can see there are 2 pairs of markers in blue. Now this is where it gets really difficult to explain, and it really needs moving images, so I'll probably go all of this when I can play the game and see what they've actually incorporated. But as easy as I can, if we want our ballistic weapons to hit, we want their blue crosshair types to be over the target. I originally thought each one was the left and right gun, but apparently as you get closer to being able to hit the target, they get closer and closer together until it's one crosshair. I don't really want to assume or delve further into this particular design, so we'll move on. Next we have missile locking. Everything stays the same, except we seem to lose the ITTS markers, which I'm not sure if simply for the sake of demonstration or not, but I'd always want them showing if in close combat. If we have a missile armed and selected, which is also in range, a red diamond will appear on the target reticule. We're told that if the missile requires time to lock, it will blink until it's locked, which again, unless I see it in action, I can't say much. but you can assume that with sound it'll beep a few times and we'll just simply learn how long things take to lock on. Once locked, the diamond turns slightly bolder, and once a missile is fired, and in this case a heat-seeking missile, it shows the projected path with the missile itself being highlighted in a counterclockwise spinning red triangle. That's pretty much it so far. I know it isn't the final design, and some of these might not actually be in-game assets, but I really like they've incorporated what we have today, like the EEGS on the F-16, into their own designs. Some devs don't care about information on targets like distance, relative velocity, tone directions, weapons at target range and other things, but these guys do. I love it. What worries me is the magazine goes on to state they want more 3D items and effects. I'm really not into that stuff. In combat, function comes over form, and if said item needs to look cooler, I hope it doesn't interfere with what I'm looking at on top of all. Otherwise, well, they know better than me. Before we finish up, I thought I'd like to say that it's good to see they're putting a lot of thought into this with different variations, and I hope during the actual public testing phases we get to try out different methods and provide feedback. I think the community can have a good impact on changing things if they need to be, but until we start seeing some of the more final iterations of designs, we can't assume anything is final. As a last quick look, they've also posted the mock-up of the Avenger cockpit, and automatically we can see striking similarities, with the additions of some clearer multi-function displays. We talked earlier about unification of designs, and in the jump point issue they state, quote, "I believe this fundamental concept could be reused across all other ships, but displayed in drastically different ways." This is great. It tells me they understand that some things would be the same across aircraft from different roles to manufacturers, with the obvious difference being the type and role of a spaceship. That's it for now. I hope you've enjoyed what we've talked about so far, and it's unlikely we'll have much to talk about until the Dogfighter module is released. If you have any suggestions or ideas, please leave them in the comments. Same goes for opinions and all things, of course. Thank you for watching. Fly safe.